Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise just to say a few words on behalf of the Green Party. The Greens will be playing our part as a part of this Parliament to find out what happened. And I think that's important because we're doing it on behalf of New Zealand parents, but we're doing it on behalf of parents all around the world. And that needs to be our #1 priority. Mums and dads, both here in New Zealand but elsewhere as well, in other parts of the world, need to be sure that the food they're feeding their kids is safe. And that needs to be the fundamental starting point for anything that we do and anything that we say as a Parliament. And I believe that around this chamber today that is a common understanding, and I believe that we will all do everything we can to ensure in the first instance we locate all the contaminated ingredients, that we provide all the information necessary to the parents so that they can be aware of that. I'd also say that I think there's a much more important role for the Ministry of Health. I'd like to see the Ministry of Health stepping up and providing advice to parents. MPI is fine, but it is the Ministry of Health that I think should be playing a bigger role in this, and we need more information and a much larger campaign to get that information out than we've seen up to date. I'd also say that there's a number of critical questions that we're going to need answers to when we go forward and deal with this issue. Are our food regulations adequate? Does the regulator have a sufficiently independent and powerful position over the industry? It's very important, I believe, that the regulator, in this case MPI, is in a position where it can control the industry, if necessary enforce standards, and make sure that the industry is operating within the rules that the regulator sets rather than the other way around. And we need to make sure that that's exactly what's happened here. We also have a question about whether the lessons from the DCD scare have been learned. We know that that was, in some ways, the first concern that came up a number of months ago, and we want to make sure that we learnt the lessons from the DCD scare. This is not just a Fonterra problem, and it's not just an MPI problem. It's a problem for all of us. And I think that we as a Parliament need to reinforce the fundamental values that underpin it. It seems to me that there's a place for the nanny state, and there's a time for the nanny state. And if that isn't protecting the safety of food that we feed to our children, then I don't know when else we would have the nanny state. This is exactly when we need that kind of state to protect the well-being of our children. We have some fundamental questions to ask about the time lag between the discovering of the Clostridium and the determination that it was Clostridium botulinum. Those number of months between those 2 points in the timeline seem to me particularly critical. I think I've got my head around now why Clostridium wasn't found at the beginning. It was only when it was tested later to be fed to go into the baby formula food stream. That makes sense to me. But why the gap between the identification that there was Clostridium there and that it was Clostridium botulinum? It seems to me those months there need more explaining why there was such a big gap between those 2 points in the timeline. And I hope that the government puts that as a priority in the inquiries that follow this. Federated Farmers Willie Lefferink said in the Don Post today, if there's any break in this pasture-to-plate chain, then product does not go, or rather that is how things are meant to work. That chain of custody seems to me critical to the food security issues that we need to get right, and I look forward to the government inquiry that comes once we've got through this initial period of making sure that people and children are safe.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, we thank the Prime Minister for his statement on the Fonterra contamination scare.